Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. Today, we are going behind the bench with Jackie Sherrill. Logan Landers is our producer and engineer. Our co-host and founder is Vincent Turner, and Jackie Sherrill joins us again today. And Jackie, you're not outside the doctor's office today. You get to be inside. How about that? You're not sitting in the car. First and foremost, we wish your lovely bride that everything last week is going well. Obviously, that's the key and the most important thing, but for obvious reasons, you've moved indoors.
I am today, and I'm in Bryan, Texas, and have a couple of meetings, and then going to sign books. We go next week on Wednesday to the MDA and to the Cancer Children's section or unit, and try to make some happy faces and give them hats and T-shirts. And I've got some clown noses. I dress up and make balloons and draw on them. But I've got some clown noses I'm taking this year to put on the kids.
Can you make the little dogs out of the little long balloons? Can you do that? Is that one of your many talents?
Yes, and then draw their face on them, feet.
I love it. All right. And you're helping raise money for kids, and especially children that are sick, hospitalized. God bless you for that.
Yeah. And, some of these kids have been clients or patients of the hospital for, 15, 16 years. And, they're receiving, therapy. They go back all the time. So, when people, unfortunately, when we get cancer, and my wife is a survivor, but when people get cancer in little kids, it may be many, many years that they have to go back and get some type of therapy every year.
Yeah. And the follow-up treatment until you're free from the diagnosis, it can take some time. But obviously you're a part of the money raising, I guess, and research that is needed, as well as just the basic costs of hospitalization anyways, right?
Yes. And it's a good deal for the kids. Your mission is to make them laugh, to give them a day outside of what they are going through.
Well, I could make a kid laugh if I talked about Colorado State's history from a football perspective, where they would be, come on, you got to be kidding me. When did you beat somebody? Well, at least while I was there, we struggled with that a little bit. But you get to talk now. Do you speak to them about national championships and A&M football and Bulldogs, being on the sidelines for all that?
The biggest treat that yes. But the biggest treat they have is when we have a tug of war with them, and then they have a tug of war with all their nurses and attendants that attend to them. And Of course, they always win. And that's probably the biggest highlight and the most cheering going on is with the tug of war.
Yeah. And you need to do some more deadlifts and some power cleans in order to be able to be in better shape. But you gave that up many, many years ago, didn't you, Jackie?
No, I still get in there as much as I can. Yeah, I can still move a little weights.
Before we move on, I want to go back to your playing days. You're playing at the University of Alabama. Today, there are kids that have fast twitch, muscle fiber, plyometric, specific muscle group training. That didn't exist in the mid-1960s, did it? When you were playing at Alabama, was it basically bench, power cleans, incline, and deadlifts, or was it the basic four, or was weightlifting even a big part of Alabama football back then?
Hey, Harper, I don't remember going into the weight room. If we did, it was about a size of a half garage.
Okay.
Single car garage.
Yeah.
And all hours, we had 45 minutes in the gym, and it was all in the quick stuff, on the mats, seat rolls, seat drills, Then we climbed ladders, we climbed ropes, and then we had some agility drills. But it was all 15 minutes in each session. But it was all strictly for quickness, for strength that you use in movement rather than building bulk.
Yeah.
We did not lift weights.
Yeah. Like I said, it didn't exist back then. That's why I asked in the first place. It was more, I would imagine, more like what the military would do, stealing things like you mentioned, doing pull-ups or climbing rope or different things that you do for your agility, for trying to build speed and power while you're moving versus just lifting weights.
Well, climbing the rope, you went up about 20 feet, 25 feet. And, unless you had the arm strength and back strength, you couldn't do it because you sit, in a sitting position and you just start climbing up the rope. You learn real quick that you did not grab a hold other than maybe right above your head, because it was all short strokes. Because if you reach too high, you were not going to pull yourself up to the next height. But, there were a lot of garbage cans, 55-gallon drums that we visited in that room.
I know exactly what you mean. Jerry Tarkanian, with the Running Rebels, would have one on each of the four corners and one on each side of mid-court when they were running and getting conditioning drills. I'm sure Coach Bryant made you guys run until breakfast, maybe lunch, and dinner from the night before was all gone.
Coach never came up there. It was all the assistant coaches. But one day, Coach Snellenberger was not very happy. And I think he dropped everybody in the room but me. They're banging the door, the next class trying to get in, and he has me on the mat drill. And finally, I looked at him and I said, "You ain't dropping me, you blank blank." And he stopped.
Question. Coach Sherrill, was it true that Coach Bryant will put you to the limit? That's what he really got off on?
Yes. He in practice, he always said one of the biggest things, and I used it, you have to practice harder. Practice has to be harder than the games. If it's not, you're not going to perform very well. And even if you looked at Michael Jordan, you looked at the guys today that are the great baseball players, basketball players, you watch their training, they are training really hard. Now, Hugh Green used to laugh at in practice that when he'd get a rookie offensive tackle, he'd just wear him out every day in practice and laugh at him. And so he made that tackle get better because he had to learn, because that tackle had to block Lawrence Taylor. And he says, if you can't block me, you dadgum sure are not going to block Lawrence Taylor.
All right, Hawk.
Coach, if you don't mind, some of the things that I learned, that there are distinct differences between a high school, a college, and a professional coach in the terms of how much they get involved. But one of the things that really impressed me is when I was in Green Bay, and Mike Holmgren would stop practice if someone made a mental mistake. You'd correct it right there on the spot, and you'd walk through it having done it wrong. You walk through it doing it right. You go to the right place, you run the right route, you make the right read, whatever it is, offense, defense, special teams, it didn't matter. You correct it immediately, and then you move on. You correct it slowly, but then you correct it at full speed, and then you can go on to the next play. Was that something that you had learned early in the Alabama portions of your practices while you were playing, that you were able to carry over into your coaching career after you were done playing?
Oh, yes. I loved Lombardi. Lombardi would run one play over and over. And I remember
27G, right?
Oh, yes. I remember. Yes, it was. I remember going to watch Oklahoma play in practice. They would run the same play down the field. And so I did that. I would, in practice, no one would know. It wouldn't be on the practice schedule. But in practice, we're going to run this one play. We're going to learn how to execute this one play. Now, Mike Leach used to spend a whole practice just on running takeoffs. And I remember being at the Texas Tech game when Texas was really good, and they beat Texas because they were behind. They ran a takeoff, and Crabstreet and the quarterback were on the same page, and he stopped at X yard line and did a stopped curl, and the ball was there, and the ball was in the air way before he stopped and turned.
Right.
But it was the practice that he did over and over and over.
If you practice it at 100% speed and you practice it correct, it can carry over, and oftentimes does, where in a game it's easy. And I guess that as a coach is the greatest accomplishment that you can come with, where the players know before the snap of the ball, this is going to work. We're going to be able to get the first down or the touchdown, or we're just going to get 7 yards like we need to. We break a tackle, now it's a 25-yard game. And the consistency of doing it correctly, there's Crabtree right there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the touchdown that beat Texas. And you can see, he caught the ball probably on the 5-yard line and just made a great move. But, the ball was in the air way before he caught it.
Yep. And that you get to see in practice and in spring ball and during training camp that you have. What were some of the things that you would want to focus on in between the dead time that I'll call the end of spring ball, when there's really no more football responsibilities, at least on the field, until they come into camp in August?
Time off.
And that, or give or take, late July or August. What were some of the things that you, as the head man, had learned from Paul Bear Bryant or from Johnny Majors, that you said, this is what we're going to do, and this is going to go with me wherever I go? I know it works, and it's going to work here as well as it did anywhere else that I've been.
Well, time off. You have to give the players some downtime. This is your time. Do what you want to do. If you want to go to visit mom or dad, or you want to go visit wherever, but time off. And then you actually, you put the calendar together for a whole year, and you make sure you stay on that calendar, because I was at A&M last week, or it may have been the week before. That was as soon as they finished their spring practice, then the head coach had and the assistants, but the head coach had the individual meeting with every player. I go to the office and to say hello, but these players were sitting in his office waiting for their turn to go in and talk to him, and that was their spring exit communication with the head coach. And today that conversation is a lot deeper than the conversation we had years ago. The years ago was, what are you doing this summer? Are you going to summer school? On and on. But now you have to add into all the other things that the NCAA damn sure didn't correct, or never had any guidelines to make sure it didn't happen. And again, that's my opinion. But the coach is spending his time negotiating with the kid of playing time, of NIL money. I mean, it's over. It's really mind-boggling that you have a head coach that has to concern himself with how much I'm paying a kid.
That, the portal, if he's not happy, he might leave. You've got to keep mom and dad happy because they may suggest that it's time for you to go somewhere else because you should be a starter here. And if you're going to split time with somebody else, or if there's a freshman that comes in that's really good, that gets a lot of spring time, there may be a misunderstanding in that. I want to see what this kid can do as a freshman. That doesn't mean the junior or the rising senior isn't going to play. I just want to see what this other kid. It's a virtual dominoes avalanche of concerns and things that you didn't have to deal with. What was, I want to go past and present. What were some of the big things that you would tell guys, hey, go to class, get your degree, or at least work on it. Please come back in shape. I think you can gain 10 pounds. We'd love to have you 1/10 of a second faster in the 40. Those were your basic concerns back in those days in the early 80s, 90s, etc. Is that correct, Coach, or is there something that I'm missing?
Yeah, you did that. Of course, they talked to the assistants and the trainer, but and the weight coach. But a good example, I had a young man come in my office. He was injured. He was leading the nation until he got hurt, tore his knee up.
Okay.
And so he was out of the rest of the year. And so his exit interview, he came in and he started talking about, because this was his third year, and he actually had 2 more years because he got a medical red shirt, but 1 more year would put him in eligibility to pro ball. And he came in and he started to go there, and I stopped him. I said, listen, and his name was Kiefer McGee, great player. And I said, Kiefer, if you have a great year, you're in the NFL. If you don't, then you're coming back. So we don't need to have this conversation. And he understood. I mean, it's very simple. Have a great year, you're gone. If you don't, you're going to be here. And that's, the coaches have to be honest with the players. The issue now is I'm a negotiator. Negotiating what? $20,000, $30,000. I don't know if and I'll take some great coaches, Barry Switzer, Mark Stoops, and I can put myself in there. I wouldn't be the negotiator. I would be the coach. How do you navigate this? What you should and you shouldn't do. Here's how you can and can't. I wouldn't be sitting there, well, okay, I'll give you X more.
Well, was it a 4-year term back in those days, Jackie? Was a full scholarship for the entire time that we were there, plus the added semester, let's say after you're done with your senior year, you could still get that following spring academic in, and then your scholarship ends. No, was it a 1-year deal back then?
Yeah, 10 semesters.
Okay.
Now, I will say this publicly. I called the NCAA and I said, I want to bring players back. They said, you can't. I said, why? They're going to do the same thing every student does. They're in a 20-hour work week. For their tuition and fees. They're not getting room and board. They're not getting anything else. So they're not any different than that student working 20 hours a week trying to pay for schooling. So I'm not giving them anything. They're working. And they said, you can't do it. I said, why? There's nothing in the books that says I can't. And he said it would create a recruiting advantage. And I said, what advantage? Anybody can do this. And when the phone call was done, they knew I was going to do it. but I wanted them to go public on it and see who would win.
Well, there are lots of different ways to fight City Hall, and you've obviously. Go ahead, Vincent. I know you have a question. Go right ahead.
Yes, Coach Sherrill. I was living in Dallas, Texas back in '83 when you was down coaching at A&M. And I was on a job with a gentleman with some of his relatives. And this gentleman, y'all was recruiting him heavy. But he wanted to go to Southern University because he went down to Southern and saw those beautiful women down there in Louisiana. And you know who I'm finna go with, but he ended up signing with y'all. Talk about the Thomas Howard situation, because he was a highly, highly recruited football player. But he wanted to go to Southern, but y'all got him, and he came to A&M based on what his father wanted him to do. I don't mean to put it out there, but I just like to hear your version.
Well, you recruit the mom first. And
yes,
then
sir.
How strong the mom is, she dominates and dictates what the father says. So that young man came here because of his mom, not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back to you, Hawk. I just wanted to ask a question because I know that young man was I think he was the best linebacker in the state at the time, correct?
Yes, he was a good player.
Back to you, Hawk.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the recruiting process. If you don't mind, it never stops. It's 24/7. Now, it has changed a little bit. I will tease and say that back then it was postage stamps and maybe Morse code, and I'm teasing. But now it's Instagram, it's Facebook, and Huddle, where kids have their own ability to put their film out, and coaches can go into that portal and find out about players. But from the end of spring ball till you go into training camp, you're still recruiting every day. But what you're looking for the next year's guys. So how does that involve the high school coaches and having a great communication with them, going to the big towns, the small towns? What was your philosophy, Jackie, regarding the off-season recruiting portion of your coaching?
Well, the first thing that I always did, and I did it 3 or 4 times a year, I had the whole staff rank our football team, every player, regardless if I'm the offensive line coach. I rated all the players.
The existing guys on your team that are returning for the following year. So the juniors through freshmen, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so in the rating, I used either blue, red, white. Now you would use, 2, 3, 4, 5-star. So I would have all the coaches rate all the players, put it together, and then put them on the board by positions, break it up by positions. Let's say I had 3 quarterbacks. This quarterback's a 5, this quarterback's 3 or 2 or whatever. And the offensive tight ends, we did the same thing, offensive tackles, whatever. So it gave us, just looking on the board, exactly what our football team looked like. And if we didn't have good players in those positions, then we had to get into the portal. I'm talking about today. You have to get into the portal and go get those. And you can overload a position if you're not careful, because 3 quarterbacks that are 5-star can't play. Right. That's not going to happen. 3 tight ends are not going to play. So you go through, and then that gives you a better idea of the players you actually have, the players that you need. But what it also did, it gave you the coach that actually recruited the player. What kind of evaluator is he? And you didn't have to say a word. It's on the board. Then I put another sheet together, how much it costs to recruit that kid. Meaning, this coach has had this expense, this coach had this expense, and that back then it was just traveling, talking to the players. It wasn't, but today you can you can put that value that you're giving that player, and does he deserve it? And if you got a lot of players that you're giving money to that is not producing, you have to make some decisions. And so that's the change. Basically, what you're doing today and what we did. Now put in all the electronics. That's part of it because they're on every day. And so today, you need somebody that teaches them how to use the social media to their advantage, how to market themselves to their advantage, but also all the things they should not put out on social media. So you're hiring a whole group of people today that we didn't have years ago. I mean, every staff has 30 plus employees on the football staff. How many? I mean, you look even in pro ball, they don't have that kind of numbers. So it completely is different today. And it's getting bigger and bigger because we're adding more things to it. Now you have to have a more compliance people, because you have to put in today to when they go to profit sharing, you'll have to monitor every kid, not like you're monitoring today.
Yeah, the monetization knowledge. You brought up something, if you don't mind, let me ask you another question. I want to dig a little deeper. You mentioned that you put the red, was it red? I'm sorry, blue, white, and red dots next to
blue, red, white.
Yeah, that was your ranking system. Say this is a starter, this is a guy that we're going to project as a starter, and the others we're not sure of. How much of that includes the incoming freshmen, the JC kids, or the other transfers that you haven't seen yet, but you know are going to be in the roster in the fall?
Well, the same thing. You're just pre-evaluating because you don't know, they have not been on that field to produce. But
right.
by film, you do the same thing. That this kid, now a blue to me, if you're a 5-star, you're a starter, you're an All-American, you also are a high draft choice, and you're playing in the NFL for a long time. So don't give me a 5-star that you'll think he'll be a good college player. He's got to be a hell of a lot better than just a college player. Yeah. So the evaluation, everybody evaluates differently. But when I had a blue, that was my standard. He's a starter. He's all conference, all American, and he's a high draft choice.
Jackie, you mentioned the conversations that you would have with players. Take that that guy that isn't quite there yet, but you see a guy that's going to play in the NFL for 5 or 10 years, but he's only a sophomore and he hasn't started yet. The senior that was in front of him on the depth chart has just graduated. Now you've got a rising junior who'll be playing or starting for the very first time. What type of conversation do you have with him regarding leadership, expectations, playing through distractions that he's going to have at a different level, where he's going to be a guy that you're counting on in a different way as a junior than what he was looked at as a freshman or a sophomore? What's that conversation go like for you?
That's a 24-hour, 365-day-a-year deal.
Okay.
I applaud Nick Saban because Nick was, in his time, he was the number one in the country that was giving players more than X's and O's. He himself, he would bring people in, professionals, to help the players, even to help him. But if you noticed 90% of the time when a player was interviewed after the game, he repeated what the hell Nick said during the week.
Yeah.
So he was giving them a lot more than X's and O's, giving them about life, giving them other things. And I applaud Nick because that's one thing as a coach you need. When we talk about leadership is not taking a kid and bringing him and saying, you're going to do this. It's not taking a kid, running him up and down the stairs, or taking a kid and disciplining him in different ways. It's taking the kid and teaching him how to be this person. Now, you can't make him, but you damn sure can teach him.
Yeah.
That's the responsibility of a coach. It's a responsibility of a parent. You know, you have to give your kids more than food, clothing, and that roof over their head.
I agree. And then you have said on numerous occasions that you weren't always the best friend, nor was the player your best friend. Talk a little bit about, for example, we mentioned Coach Bryant a little while ago. When Bear Bryant would have a one-on-one with Jackie Sherrill, it wasn't always smooth sailing, but you learned a valuable life lesson. And the movie, The Junction Boys, although it made him look like he was this monster, there were numerous stories outside of that movie of players coming back, having great business careers, and thanking him for teaching that young man to be a man in ways that they were much more successful than they would have been had they have gone under someone else's tutelage.
Well, very simple. All the guys that survived the junction, they ended up very, very successful, either in coaching or in business. And I go back to some of the kids I coached, and the walk-ons sometimes ended up being more successful than the starter. And that tells you that one thing in philosophy, when a kid works harder but may not have the same talent, he's going to work harder when he gets out and gets that job. And there's a lot of kids that are very successful. You know, a couple of them are close to being a billionaire.
Wow.
So, you know.
Question, Coach Sherrill, before we end the day, I just wanted to get what was your relationship one-on-one with Mark May?
Well, plenty of times Mark May did not like me.
Because he was a very intelligent guy, had a very career on ESPN.
Yes. No, but he also knew that I didn't like him all the time. Yeah, but he was extremely intelligent, and when he was on the TV with Lou Holtz, I'd send him little tidbits about things I either did to Lou Holtz or that I knew, and he always agitated Lou.
Yes, sir. Back to you, Harp.
One of the great things about Mark is that you could have a conversation with him, and it could be kind of general, but his real relationship with his offensive line coach. So I'm sure there were times that you would have an O-line meeting. All right, what do we need to, not just with Mark, but let's say with Jimbo or Freilich or any of the other great linemen that were a part of that team in those days with Bostic, for example. And, hey, what do we need to do to get these guys rolling? You would have the similar conversation with your wide receiver coach or your running backs coach and again, you didn't have 30 guys on your staff. You had 8, maybe 9, right? Total. So you had
9 total, yes.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing, Jackie, that you would have your linebacker coaches also running special teams, or at least the punt team, you know? Yeah. And so for those that may not be aware, you're coaching with the coaches, and then that position coach is going to have a conversation and probably spend a heck of a lot more time with the Mark Mays and the Bill Frelichs and the Dan Marinos and Tony Dorsetts than you do.
Yes, except the little one-on-ones.
Right.
It's a funny story on Danny. Danny put the ball on the ground one day, and I walked over, put my arm around him, and I said, "Those 5 guys up there kill for you." I said, "Danny, they don't want a sissy as a quarterback." And it really made him mad. And Hugh Green kind of walked over and laughed at him and says, "What did Coach Sherrill whisper in your ear?" And I can't tell you what Danny said, but he was not happy. He never put the ball on the ground without going after it again either.
How about that? Yeah. Lesson learned. And that was during a practice, right? That's just one day at practice. And, everybody's there watching. You're always under the gun as a player. Everything you do is being watched and filmed and recorded. And it's not because the coaches are mean. They just want to get the best out of you so you play well on Saturday, right? I mean, that's the goal and the objective. How do I motivate these guys to get them ready to go?
Yes. Well, I coached all the special teams, the punters, kickers, snappers, and holders, and personally. And the kicker, before he would go and kick a field goal, I'd ask him, "Can you make it?" And if there was any hesitations, we went for it. And if he was that confident and said, "Yeah, I'd make it," you go kick it. And we won a lot of games on the last field goal kick too.
Were you near Joe Namath when Paul Bear Bryant says to him, "How are you going to do in this week? Are we going to win this week's game?" I think so, Coach. It was something like that. Were you familiar with that quote and that conversation?
Yeah, Coach Bryant, that he was a year ahead of me. So that was the year before I got my freshman year. We couldn't play, so we didn't travel. And it was in Birmingham. We're playing, I think, Tennessee. And Coach Bryant would always walk after breakfast, walk around the block. And he would walk with the quarterbacks. And he asked Joe, he says, "Joe, you ready?" And Joe, meaning all the plays and so forth. And Joe responded, "I think so, Coach." And he stopped him and he said in a real loud voice, "You think so? Boy, you better be ready. It's not think so." He says, and so that prompted Joe. And even today, I think Joe would tell that story if somebody asked him. But I had an episode with a coach. We lose our 2 tight ends during fall camp. And Monday night, Coach Bryant never would come to the coach players' rooms. Never did. And all of a sudden, he's in my office. In my doorway. And I'm thinking, trying to scramble and get square. And he says, "Can you play tight end?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'll try." And he said, "Blank, I know you'll try. I want to know if you can play the damn thing or not." And I wasn't going to say I'll try. I said, "Yes, sir, I can play it." So they got me ready on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We opened with Georgia. They got me ready to play tight end.
I think so. No, that's not the answer that any coach wants to hear. You better know, Don.
I used that. Yeah, and I used that with the players forever. If I ask a question, I think so. No, I'm not asking you. Can you do it or not?
Yeah. Yeah. That transcends time. That's a father-son or mother-daughter conversation. What that goes with everything. Are you going to be home at curfew? And I think so. No, that's going to be completely different. But again, life lessons, Jackie, little things like that happen in between a coach and a player that affects him and leads to where Joe Willie Namath will still tell that story just the same way, and the impact that it had on him,
Yeah.
and how it made him a better man. I better be ready, and so I can answer without even hesitating. Yes, Coach, I'm ready.
Well, I took the players to children's hospitals, and the reason I did was not because but it was to teach them that they play in a very physical sport. And a lot of those kids have never been around handicapped kids that will never play the game of football.
Right.
So I would take them, but I would learn a lot more about the players than they understood, because you could tell real quickly the ones that had compassion, the ones that could relate, and the players that could not relate to those kids. And you got a better feeling and understanding of what was inside that kid and I didn't make it a big deal. Didn't say anything to the assistant coaches. I just observed. But the best player ever was Tony Dorsett.
Really?
Yes.
He got it.
Tony could have kids crying and laughing at the same time. No, he was the best that ever went into a hospital.
TD.
Well, some guys have never been exposed to that before, and I imagine the freshman that goes to that hospital the very first year is probably a little intimidated in some respects. But by the time he's a senior, maybe he not quite as good as Tony, but pretty doggone close. You know what I mean? You get to see some development in that, and a real understanding for some of the real world issues that other people outside of football have to go through.
In the game, and it could be in any sport, but you two guys have been on teams where you were not the most talented team, but you won. So why did you win? If you're talking about, I only have to have talent. Well, no. There's a lot more to being able to win and there's a book called Clausewitz on War. Need to get it.
Okay.
It's the Bible of the West Point. I want to say it was written in the 1500s. But then they've had tons of revisions. But chapter 3 talks about what makes a leader. And it's not the biggest, the strongest, the richest. It's the one that has the biggest, strongest will.
Yep. Will and desire, obviously. Yep.
Yes. And that's what you're looking. So when you talk to teams, when you evaluate players, which player has the strongest will to win? So your job as a coach is to make that more important to him, to make him stronger in his will to win. And that's why, back when you had players and you have off season, you're trying to get the players, push the players to a point that they never thought they could get before.
I agree. Well, Jackie, we want to be respectful of your time. You have a signing at the hospital here a little bit later. Where can folks get a copy of the book? If they can get a signed copy, is that possible for some of our listeners that might want to help out with the hospital and also get to read about you?
Scholarships, yes. We've given almost 40 scholarships to kids at Texas A&M. The last year, we gave 6. 3 went to core members. And the last core member that spoke started crying, and he said, without this money, I could not have finished next semester. So, yeah, the money from the book goes to do different things like the hospital or the scholarships.
And how would someone get a copy of that book? Where would they go?
They could look up the website, and it's called 12thmkot.com.
12thmkot.com, and you can just go on that and browse in there, get a copy of the book, and hopefully is there a possibility to request for a signing that you might be able to sign that book and send it out?
Be glad to.
There we go. Love it. All right. Well, we want to be respectful of Jackie's time. Go ahead, Jackie.
Well, they can request it. They can use my email if they want to.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure that we get all that available on our next show. We'll follow up with that. But I know that you've got a signing right now that you need to do. So we want to say thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I want to say thank you to Logan. Final thoughts, Vincent, before we go?
Appreciate you, Coach Sherrill. And I'd like to say thank you. I'm going to give it back to Harp. And Harp, you know, you and Logan have a special thing for Coach Sherrill for we end the show today. Back to you, Harp.
Go right ahead, Logan.
Jiggle. You know, Jimmy Johnson played that song over and over when he had a party at his house all the way back in the 60s. Even though Jimmy went to Arkansas, I think he really wanted to go to A&M.
Well, some folks do. Now, I imagine that they play that at the Texas practice field
the
week before the game, so that they don't want those players to hear that fight song not one more time, at least for the game. They want to pitch a shutout.
They used to have a dinner that week and bring back all the great players, and they would talk something about A&M.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, thank you, Logan, for putting that together. And for obvious reasons, we want to say thank you to our co-host and founder, Vincent Turner, but more importantly to Behind the Bench host, Jackie Sherrill. Thank you, Jackie, for being a part of today's show. We look forward to having you on again next week.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of today's show as well. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching 100 Yards of Football. We hope you have a fantastic rest of your week.